Welcome to the North Carolina Diagnostic and Placement Test Review session for the English portion of the placement test. This presentation is broken down into three different PowerPoint presentations. The first is reading, the second is the right placer or essay portion of the placement test, and the third and final section is revising and editing. Before we get started, we just want to go ahead and introduce you to the placement test. As I mentioned before, this is made up of three different sections: reading, revising and editing, and right placer. You will be asked to write your essay first, and you will have 2 hours to complete the essay. The remainder of the exam is comprised of multiple choice questions and is not timed. Again, you have 2 hours to complete the essay, between 300 and 600 words, and then you will have an infinite amount of time to answer 50 multiple choice questions. This is not a pass-fail exam. Essentially, your score will place you on a spectrum that will allow admissions office and registration officials to place you into the proper English course so that you're neither over-challenged or under-challenged in terms of content. So, in preparing for the reading section, this section contains 30 questions and is untimed. Every time you answer a question, you're going to be asked first to confirm your choice before you submit the answer. Once you hit that submit button, though, you cannot go back. So make sure that you're ready to submit your final answer, hit that submit button, and then let it go and move on. The topics that are covered in this particular section are finding the main idea and or summarizing, supporting details and paraphrasing, vocabulary, organization, inference, point of view, fact opinion, bias, purpose and tone, and an author's use of language. Let's move on to the first point, which is finding the main idea or the summary. Sometimes the main idea is going to be in a sentence. At other times, the main idea is implied through specific details and examples. To find the main idea, you want to ask yourself the following questions while you're reading. What is this passage about? What is the biggest point being made about this topic? If you had to sum everything up that was stated in the paragraph, what would that one statement be? Now, each of these examples that I'm going to go through, I'm going to read the passage, and then we're going to provide the correct answer, and then we're going to have a short discussion of why this answer is the best choice and the other answers are poor choices. I am going to go ahead and move right through this, though, so if you want to test yourself, I would encourage you, when I move to a new slide, attempt to answer the question yourself and then wait for the correct answer to be revealed. So the main idea of this passage is that PVC, the material used in water pipes, is discovered by accident. This answer is correct because it's something that is stated directly in the paragraph. It was something that he observed. He accidentally discovered it in 1835. This is the best choice for this answer. Answer A is incorrect because there's absolutely no mention of a rare chemical compound in this paragraph. Answers C and D are also wrong for the very same reason. Neither of these points were mentioned in the paragraph. And one of the biggest things you want to remember about this placement test is it's always about the best choice. But we want to make the best choice based on the information that is provided to us. So we never want to add information into these paragraphs, and similarly, we never want to remove information from these paragraphs. Here's another example. The human body adds bone mass in order to replace dead bone tissue. And again, this answer is the best choice because it's stated directly in the first sentence of this paragraph. Our bones grow continuously throughout our lives, with old bone cells dying and being discarded. So it gives you that answer, that main idea right there in that first paragraph. All of the other answers are incorrect for the very same reason as the previous example. There's no mention of a lack of exercise in this paragraph, so we already know that answer B is just not an option at all. Similarly, answer C and D are incorrect for the same reason. The next thing that you're going to be tested on in this reading portion of the placement test is your ability to determine supporting details or paraphrase information. Supporting details explain, prove, or illustrate your main idea. Think of supporting details as extra information about the topic. We know the main idea, but everything else that comes after, all those little extra quips, those are all supporting details. Paraphrasing is restating a text in another form or with other words. A lot of times authors will use this, or people who are sharing information based on something that they read, they'll use this to simplify or to clarify the information. What's important to remember about paraphrasing, though, is that all of the information contained in the passage is the same. It's just the wording that is different. So here's an example about finding supporting details or paraphrasing. And again, if you want to play along with this and quiz yourself, I would encourage you to pause the video now and hit play once you've determined an answer for yourself. So why does the author say that the vampire in Nosferatu is named Count Orlok and not Count Dracula? The answer, of course, is A, to show that the makers of Nosferatu made minor changes to Stoker's story. This answer is correct. The author points out that the film is closely based on, but not exactly the same as Bram Stoker's novel Dracula. The author then goes on to explain that the vampire is called Count Orlok in order to show that the makers made minor changes to the story because they couldn't secure the rights to Dracula. Choices B, C, and D are incorrect because the author does not indicate that the characters in Nosferatu were based on real people, and the author neither criticizes Nosferatu for its differences from Dracula, nor does it praise the makers of the film for their imagination in recreating Stoker's novel. In terms of vocabulary, this section is pretty much what you would assume it to be. You're going to be given a passage, and then they're going to ask you to essentially define one of the words or tell us what one of the words used in the passages most likely means. So in this instance, in the first sentence, verified most nearly means confirmed. In the first sentence of the passage, the author explains that the discovery of the rainbow toad was originally thought to be a case of mistaken identity, but it was recently verified by scientists. So in this particular context, verified most nearly means confirmed. The author's point is that scientists confirmed or established the truth of the discovery when they found the 3 specimens. The author is not indicating that the scientists revealed or documented the discovery. It's clear that the explorers made records of their discovery and then told others about it. So choices A and D are incorrect for that reason. And choice C is incorrect because it's kind of illogical to suggest that scientists today could have controlled a discovery that happened back in 1924. A lot of these examples that you're going to see on this exam, most of them are going to be based on using common sense and logic. So if you don't know the right answer right away, make sure that you whittle the other ones down. And if you absolutely have to guess, it would be a 50-50 chance of getting it right instead of a 25% chance of getting it right. So, moving on to inferences. An inference is a conclusion that the reader might draw based on information in a passage. It's not stated directly by the author. So anytime we get one of these and it says a logical conclusion can be made, it's not going to be something that we see stated word for word in the paragraph. There may be different words, but we also may have to read between the lines a little bit. In order to make an inference, you need to use clues that are provided by the author's words and details that you read. You also need to use your own knowledge and your personal experience as they apply to these clues. And finally, you need to use common sense and logic. So here's another example here, and the passage suggests that the main goal of the pillow fights was to encourage people to make greater use of public spaces. Choice C here is correct. The author of this passage states that the public pillow fights were planned by an organization whose goal is to foster community enjoyment of public spaces. It makes sense then to say that the organization probably planned the pillow fights as a way to encourage people to make greater use of these public areas. Choices A, B, and D are incorrect because they do not relate to the enjoyment of public spaces, which is the goal of this movement. Moving on to point of view, fact, opinion, and bias. These are three very separate things, but we all look for them in the same types of way. Okay, a point of view is the way that the author allows you to see and hear what's going on. There's generally three accepted points of view. The first is first person, where the character narrates through their own voice. So you would see things like I, me, mine, or we, something that indicates that the author is including themselves in the conversation. Second person is when the author speaks directly to the audience, almost as if they're giving commands. You should do that. Your focus should be on this. This is the least commonly used point of view. And finally, third person, the author writes as an outsider looking in at the action. So you might see pronouns or words like he, she, it, or one, or just individuals' names. Again, think about the way that your textbooks read. The information is almost presented as fact, but there's nothing else kind of controlling it. Fact versus opinion is exactly what you might expect it to be. We need to make sure that we are able to see the difference between what is fact and what is opinion. A fact is something that is proven to be true. So it'll either have science backing it up or some particular statistic or piece of information. An opinion, on the other hand, is a personal belief. It is not founded on proof or certainty. So a fact might be that red is one of the major colors in the color spectrum. And that is absolutely a fact. You look that up anywhere and you'll find it to be true. However, green is the best of all the colors. That's my opinion. That is not a fact. It's not something that you can back up with science. It's a personal choice that I've made. Bias is kind of similar to the notion of an opinion. Bias is when a writer uses a selection of facts or a particular choice of words and the quality and the tone of their description to convey a particular attitude or a feeling. So you might be biased toward a particular college because you're a fan of their football team. You might have a preference toward a particular type of food, or you may be prejudiced against a particular type of music because you just don't like it. And again, this is called bias because there may be information that suggests that it could go either way, but the author is only going to use the information that supports their preference or their prejudice. So we got to be on the lookout for these things. Here's an example of point of view, fact, opinion, and bias. And the way things are is they're a comparison of two different passages. So I encourage you to read through passage 1, read through passage 2, and then move on and attempt to answer the question. So I would encourage you to pause it and read passage 1, pause it and read passage 2, and then attempt to answer the question which is on the slide after both of these passages. So I'm going to move through these now, but you pause as is necessary. Here's passage 2 for the point of view, fact, opinion, or bias example. So you can pause this and read through it. And then the way these questions are going to be asked is kind of a comparison or a contrast to these two things. So in reading these two passages, the author of passage 1 would most likely criticize the author of passage 2 for, the answer here is B, overlooking the drawbacks of increasing the time children spend using technology. The author of passage 1 finds it really, really troubling that so many children spend their time on computers and other devices instead of playing outside. The author of passage 2, on the other hand, thinks technology should be an even bigger part of children's lives than it already is. It's likely that the author of passage 1 would criticize the author of passage 2 for failing to think about the drawbacks of all of this extra time being spent on technology. Choice A is incorrect because the author of passage 2 states that there is very little reliable data. Okay, so it's not something that they overemphasize. They admit freely that they don't have the data to support that statement. Choice C is incorrect because the author does not discuss or dismiss development during outdoor activities. It's not something that's mentioned at all, so we can't bring it up. Again, we never want to add information. We never want to take information away. And finally, choice D is incorrect because the author of passage 1 makes no mention of careers. There's no indication that the author of passage 2 is exaggerating when they speak of careers. Finally, moving on to purpose, tone, and use of language. An author's attitude is the voice or the tone toward the subject of a passage. It's often very directly related to the purpose behind which an author is writing a passage. A useful technique to figure out what an author's purpose or tone is to imagine that you hear the sound of the author's voice as if they were reading the passage out loud to you. How would they sound in your head? Are they angry? Are they excited? Are they bored? Their mood or their tone and their purpose will ultimately determine the language that they use to convey this. And so here's an example of purpose and tone. Which word best describes the author's attitude toward plywood's qualities? The answer here is C, choice C. The author is impressed by plywood's qualities. The author seems to admire the flexibility, the low cost, and the strength that makes plywood really important in building houses. Choice A is incorrect because the author does admire plywood's qualities, but the author doesn't seem ecstatic or overjoyed. There isn't this sense of true excitement. Answer B is incorrect because although the author notes that plywood has become important despite not being aesthetically pleasing, there's no indication that the author is surprised by these qualities. Again, it's all about not adding or taking anything away. And finally, choice D is incorrect because the author certainly is not dismissive of the qualities of plywood. The author admires them. He doesn't dismiss them. He doesn't reject them. He brings them up. That's why being impressed is going to be the best option here. This final slide is just additional resources that you students can use in an attempt to prepare yourself a little bit more. This is at the end of all three of the presentations. The NCDAP study guides are available on the CCCC placement testing website at that particular web address. This particular presentation is also available as video, as you know, in the CCCC College Success Center. And the test prep review is available for free at that web address. Now again, at Test Prep Review, there are items that do need to be purchased, but if you click around enough, you can find some free study guides and practice tests that are very content specific. I would encourage you all to go and look at these NCDAP study guides. This review session was adapted directly from these study guides, and they are absolutely going to be crucial in helping you, especially in preparing to write the essay portion. Please stick around for the rest of the presentation.